charging 14 defendants with racketeering and drug trafficking offenses stemming from their membership in one of the largest and most violent gangs in the Western Hemisphere, the 18th Street Gang.
On March 3, 2026, in the Boyle Heights neighborhood of Los Angeles, a 59-year-old woman with long red hair stepped onto her balcony for a cigarette, then went back inside for her purse and keys. She got into a late-model gray Lexus and pulled out of the apartment building she owned. Half a mile down the road, unmarked cars boxed her in. 50 officers had been in position since 4 that morning, under a blood moon, waiting for her to leave. Her name was Keiko Marie Gonzalez, known on the street as Moms, as La Señora, and as La Reina, the Queen. Prosecutors say she was the second in command and the street boss of the 18th Street Gang, one of the largest street gangs in Los Angeles, and that she ran it from the outside while her husband ran his end from a cell in a California state prison. In this video, we're going to find out how a woman who looked like somebody's aunt ended up running a gang of more than 100,000 people, and why the man giving her the orders had been locked in a prison cell since 1980. Before we get into this, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The first thing to understand about Keiko Gonzalez is that she did not look like what she was accused of running. In the photographs from the day of her arrest, she is a middle-aged woman with dyed red hair in a plain blue jail shirt, her hands cuffed in front of her. When officers walked her past the cameras, she smiled and appeared to clap, like someone who had just been handed an award rather than a set of federal charges. She does have tattoos, but not the kind that announce a gang. On one forearm, in cursive, are the words, "Horses run wild." On the other, "Butterflies fly free." They read like lines from a greeting card. The woman wearing them is accused of ordering another woman shot dead over an unpaid debt. And the man she took her orders from, the one police say ran the whole thing from a prison cell, goes by the name White Horse. Nobody has said whether that tattoo was meant for him. It sits there on her arm either way, above a set of handcuffs, in a photograph taken the day the federal government finally reached her. That soft, ordinary front was useful. A shot collar covered in ink and gold draws attention. A woman who looks like she runs a daycare does not. And for a long time she operated without much of it. Behind that front, according to the officers who watched her, was someone careful to the point of paranoia. The detective who led the operation to arrest her said she kept a network of cameras around her property and watched the feeds from an 80-inch television in her living room. The kind of screen most people save for football, pointed instead at her own front door. Her power did not come from her looks. It came, the government says, through her husband. His name is Jorge Gonzales, known among gang members as White Horse, or in Spanish, Güero Caballo. He is a longtime member of the Mexican Mafia, and he has been behind bars since 1980, convicted of murder. He is now around 70 years old. A man locked up for more than 4 decades should, in theory, have no reach on the street at all. That is not how the Mexican Mafia works. Prosecutors describe Jorge Gonzalez as a narcotics and racketeering mastermind who kept giving orders from inside using a cell phone smuggled into his housing unit, a phone he was not supposed to have in a place built specifically to keep him from having one. From at least July of 2020 until the day she was arrested, investigators say his wife was on the other end of that line, taking his direction and turning it into action on the street. Prison did not take his power. Prison is where a lot of it sits. Here is the part that keeps this from being a simple story about a wife running errands. According to the indictment, Keiko Gonzalez was not just passing along messages. She had decision-making authority of her own. She oversaw the gang's day-to-day business, disciplined members who stepped out of line, collected rent, taxes, and fines, and ordered killings of her own members, of rivals, and of dealers working her territory. Prosecutors say she acted on behalf of her husband and 3 other imprisoned Mexican Mafia leaders. But the choices on the ground were hers. That distinction matters because it is the difference between a courier and a boss. A courier carries an order and has no say in it. A boss decides who pays, who is disciplined, and who does not get to keep breathing. Prosecutors put Keiko Gonzalez in the second category. In their telling, the man in the cell set the direction, and the woman on the outside decided how it landed on the street, day after day, for years. The 18th Street gang did not start as any of this. It began in the 1960s as a neighborhood gang in Los Angeles, and over the decades it grew into something much larger. Prosecutors say it now has more than 100,000 members and operates across Mexico, Central America, South America, and beyond. By the time Keiko Gonzalez was running the street side of it, it was less a neighborhood crew than a company with an international supply chain, and she managed one of its most valuable branches. The territory she managed is some of the most fought-over ground in Los Angeles. The gang controls the northern end of MacArthur Park, just west of downtown, along with parts of Skid Row, and it reaches into Hollywood and the San Fernando Valley. MacArthur Park is a place people take their kids on the weekend. It is also, prosecutors say, an open-air drug market. The DEA official who announced the case said the gang had been moving product there at will, and that the whole point of the operation was to hand the park back to the people who live around it. When a federal drug agency has to say out loud that its goal is returning a public park to the public, that tells you who had been running it. What made that market hard to shut down was where the selling happened. Investigators say the gang's dealers worked out of the homeless encampments in and around the park, setting up inside the tents to blend in with people who were actually living there. A tent is hard to search, and a row of tents full of people in real crisis is hard to raid without causing exactly the scene the gang was counting on. The suffering in that park was real, and it was also cover. On top of the drugs sat a tax. According to the indictment, anyone doing business on that ground paid the gang for the privilege, dealers most of all, though the reach went further than that. The gang collected rent, taxes, and fines, and Keiko Gonzalez made sure the money came in. The rate was higher than any landlord's, and the penalty for paying late was a lot faster than eviction. The drugs themselves did not start in MacArthur Park. Prosecutors say Keiko Gonzalez and her husband connected the gang to the Sinaloa Cartel, the Mexican organization that moves huge amounts of methamphetamine and fentanyl into the United States. A cartel can make and ship product, but it still needs people on the American side to sell it block by block and make sure the money comes back. That is what the gang provided. The cartel brought the product north, thousands of gang members put it on the street, and prosecutors say the pipeline ran from Los Angeles as far as New York. That is the part worth slowing down on. A street gang selling out of tents in one Los Angeles park does not, on its own, sound like a national problem. Tie that same gang to a cartel and a distribution line running across the country, and it becomes one. The tents in MacArthur Park were the retail end of something much larger, and prosecutors say Keiko Gonzalez sat at the point where the two connected. The killing at the center of this case happened on July 27, 2022. A woman identified in court papers only as MZ was shot to death. She was, according to prosecutors, a small-time dealer working the gang's territory, and she had made one decision that turned out to be fatal. She refused to pay the tax the gang demanded on her drug sales. This is the crime the whole case is built around. Drug charges and extortion counts can be argued down and pleaded out. A murder is different. It is the count that carries a mandatory life sentence, and it is the reason the arrest of a red-haired woman in Boyle Heights made the news across the country, instead of staying a line item in a local police report. For a woman in Keiko Gonzalez's position, a refusal like that was not really about the money. If one dealer could stop paying and keep breathing, others would notice, and the system that made her powerful would start to come apart. Prosecutors say she ordered MZ killed. The order did not go to a couple of reckless kids. It went to two older men. Their names are Jorge Carillo, known as Chuco, who was 60 when he was arrested, and Carlos Beltran, known as Negro, who was 48. A man does not reach 60 inside this world by being careless, and sending two men of that age says something about how the order was meant to be handled. Quietly. Correctly. No loose ends. Both are charged with murder in aid of racketeering. The woman the street called Moms had, prosecutors say, ordered another woman killed over an unpaid bill. The federal response came the following year. In January of 2023, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, Homeland Security Investigations, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and the Los Angeles Police Department opened a joint effort they called Operation Dead Horse. 5 agencies on one gang is not a routine amount of attention. It is the kind of headcount you assign after the normal tools have already been tried and the problem is still there. The name is worth a second, given that the man at the top of the whole thing went by White Horse. Whether that was on purpose, the government has not said. The operation ran for 3 years, in 3 phases, and the man running the takedown on the ground was a veteran LAPD detective named Hugo Aon, out of the department's Gang and Narcotics Division and the FBI Gang Task Force. He called the arrest of Keiko Gonzalez the culmination of that 3-year investigation. The mission, as he put it, was to cut the head off the gang. Cutting the head off meant solving a specific problem. Keiko Gonzalez and her chief tax collector, Edward Escalante, known as Toro, lived in adjoining units in the same 2-story building she owned in Boyle Heights. Kicking down the doors, Aon decided, was too dangerous. It risked a shootout. It risked hurting people inside, and it gave anyone in the units a few seconds to destroy evidence. So the plan was to wait. Escalante left the complex around 6:30 every morning, and on the morning of the raid he did exactly that. Officers let him get a few blocks away, then pulled him over in an ordinary traffic stop and took him without a fight. Then they settled in to wait for the woman who owned the building to do the same. She took her time. At one point, Aon told his officers that if she did not come out soon, they would tell her there was a leak in her storage unit and see if that drew her out. It did not come to that. Word came over the radio that she had stepped onto her balcony for a smoke, gone back in, and come out again with her purse and keys. She got in the gray Lexus. Unmarked cars followed, and they stopped her about half a mile from home. She was taken in without incident. Aon's reaction, on the record, was 2 words. This is perfect. Once she was in cuffs, officers went back to the building and served the search warrant. 2 more people inside were removed and detained, and the search turned up drugs, guns, and cash. All the cameras had done was record the front door of a place that was about to be searched anyway. The 80-inch television and the network feeding it had not helped her at all. The thing she built her security around was the one place the whole case came to rest. The numbers from the operation are large. Over the 3-year investigation, law enforcement recovered more than 175 pounds of methamphetamine and fentanyl. On the final day alone, agents seized roughly $80,000 in cash, 6 firearms, and several more pounds of drugs. Fentanyl in these cases is measured less by weight than by how many people a given pile of it can kill, and 175 pounds is a great deal of it. The money and the guns were not all hidden in some distant warehouse. When officers searched the Boyle Heights complex Keiko Gonzalez owned, the same one she had wired with cameras and sat watching from her couch, they found drugs, guns, and cash inside. She had built the place to keep police out. In the end, it just gave them an address where some of the evidence was waiting. When it was over, federal authorities announced that 12 members and associates of the gang had been arrested, tied to 7 separate federal indictments. Keiko Gonzalez was charged, along with Escalante and two others, with conspiracy to interfere with commerce by extortion, a federal law usually called the Hobbs Act, aimed at exactly this kind of taxing and shaking down of people trying to do business. Escalante was charged on top of that with 3 counts of attempted extortion and with distributing nearly 2 pounds of methamphetamine. Not everyone was in custody when the announcement came. Officials said 6 people connected to the case were still being sought. One was believed to be in Mexico, another in Guatemala. The gang the government had just spent 3 years dismantling had, by its own estimate, more than 100,000 members around the world. So a few missing defendants surprised no one. Even so, the people who ran it did not treat this as a small win. They called it the most significant gang takedown in Los Angeles in years, aimed at the largest street gang in the city. 12 people in custody and 7 indictments is a lot of paper for one morning's work, and the officers who did it knew exactly whose name was at the top of the chart. The whole operation was built to reach one person. The officials who announced the case did not soften their language. The first assistant United States attorney, Bill Esali, called 18th Street one of the most violent gangs in the Western Hemisphere and said it had turned one of the city's most beautiful public spaces into a crime-infested pit. The complaint, underneath the language, was specific. A park families used had become a place the gang ran on its own terms. 5 of the defendants were due in the federal courthouse downtown the same day to be arraigned. A judge was set to decide whether Keiko Gonzalez would sit in custody or go home while the case played out. She was 59 years old, facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life in federal prison. And the woman who had watched her own front door on an 80-inch screen was now the one being watched. It is worth being clear about where this stands. These are charges, not convictions. Keiko Gonzalez has not been found guilty of anything, and neither have the men arrested with her. What follows is the exposure they face if the government proves its case to a jury. If she is convicted, Keiko Gonzalez faces a maximum sentence of life in federal prison. The 2 men charged with the MZ killing, Jorge Carillo and Carlos Beltran, face a mandatory life sentence if convicted, meaning a judge would have no room to give them less. Edward Alvarenga faces up to 40 years. 2 other men, Felipe de Los Angeles and Edwin Martinez, face up to 20 years each. Escalante, the tax collector, faces a 10-year mandatory minimum and a maximum of life. For a man who spent his days collecting other people's debts, the math on his own case is not in his favor. The people who ran the takedown were careful not to call it the end of anything. The captain in charge of the LAPD's Gang and Narcotics Division, Ahmad Zarakani, called it a significant blow and said the gang would now have to restructure its leadership, which would take time. He said it would try to rebuild, and that he could not say how far it would get. Federal indictments, he noted, usually turn into more indictments. In his words, they were not done. That is the honest place to leave this. The reassuring version is the one where the arrest solves the problem, where the woman in the handcuffs was the thing holding the machine together, and taking her out makes the park safe again. That is not what the people closest to the case are saying. The park is still there. The tents are still there. The man called Whitehorse is still in his cell, around 70, more than 40 years into a sentence that never once stopped him from reaching the street. His wife is the one in custody now, and if the pattern holds, the phone finds someone new. For a long time, the way you rose in this world was to be a young man willing to do violence. Keiko Gonzalez is the reminder that the latter was never really about that. It was about who could be trusted to run the money and keep discipline, while the men who built the thing sat in cells. She has "Butterflies Fly Free" tattooed on one arm and a set of federal handcuffs on the other. And prosecutors say she ordered a woman shot dead over a tax. Somewhere in Los Angeles right now, someone is being told that this is a family. and that the family takes care of its own. Some of the people hearing that are young. Some of them are watching videos right now. If this story made you stop and think, hit the like button. That is how YouTube decides to show this to more young people who might be hearing the wrong voices right now. Drop your city in the comments. Every comment tells the algorithm this story matters. And if you are watching on your phone, hit the hype button below the video. Hype only works on mobile, and it is the fastest way to get this in front of someone who needs to hear it before they make a decision they cannot take back.